For many years, McDonald's has been the unchallenged leader in the fast food industry. With its recognizable golden arches and delicious choices, please make sure that you have clicked the subscribe button and given this video a thumbs up before we get into the technical aspects of our film. In this video, we will talk about McDonald's in crisis, bankruptcy surge 40%, when thousands of stores facing closure. As we proceed, let us consider the fast food business as a magnificent empire that is comprised of more than 40,000 sites that are dispersed over the globe. In the United States alone, it has more than 13,000 outlets, making it the biggest burger chain in the world. Additionally, it generates more than $23 billion in sales on an annual basis. It seemed as if McDonald's sales were unaffected by the disruption that took place as the virus spread around the world, causing economic loss and causing businesses to get enraged. Despite the fact that the illness wreaked havoc in the economy, this was the situation that prevailed. When presented with such challenging circumstances, a large number of people were perplexed as to how such a gigantic organization could really thrive in spite of the circumstances. A storm was brewing under the surface, one that would demolish the basic basis upon which this fast food behemoth was founded. Despite this, the storm was spreading farther below the surface. As a matter of fact, McDonald's has experienced negative consequences as a direct consequence of the epidemic. McDonald's reportedly adopted a series of price hikes in order to compensate for the reduction in sales that happened during that time period. This was done in order to compensate for the fact that sales had decreased. The firm was experiencing difficulties in the supply chain in addition to the fact that it was experiencing problems in the supply chain and increased operational expenditures, both of which were among the primary factors that were preventing the company from expanding. In spite of these issues, the firm continues to maintain a strong position in the market, which runs counter to the predictions that had been made that a growth of the number of menu items would result in a significant increase in the average ticket price. When one takes into account the magnitude of the business and the breadth of its operations, it is difficult to see how it could possibly be experiencing problems. Behind McDonald's seeming dominance on a global scale lies a reality that is not well understood to the general public for whatever reason. The fact that McDonald's seems to be in a dominant position is due to this reality. Nevertheless, despite the fact that the firm is the most successful fast food chain that the world has ever seen, the corporation continues to face challenges. Both franchisees and independent business owners in the United States of America have been at odds with one another ever since the beginning of time. When it comes to ownership of firms, independent owners make up 95% of the total. Furthermore, over the course of the last few years, this rivalry has only been more fierce as a result of the decades-long animosity that has existed between operators and McDonald's about the adoption of tighter standards and additional expectations. This antagonistic relationship has been a source of contention between the two parties. According to all appearances and purposes, it would seem that the ever-changing regulations are suffocating its own franchisees, which represents a risk to the internal collapse of the whole firm. When it comes to the regulations that regulate changes, we have arrived at a point where there is no turning back. McDonald's made the announcement that it will increase the degree of control it has over its franchisees, while at the same time insisting that it would not admit any shared employer responsibility. When the storm reached its peak, the National Owners Association and OA, which is an organization that represents more than 1,000 persons, hit their breaking point. This occurred at the same time that the storm reached its peak. This policy was taken with the intention of safeguarding the corporation from any possible legal implications that may be incurred as a result of the conduct of franchise owners. The owners and operators of McDonald's restaurants throughout the country have voiced their intense disapproval to this measure, which was implemented with purpose. It was said by them that McDonald's should stop functioning as a joint employer if they wanted to keep their independence and did not want to be seen as a single organization. Rhett mentioned a number of possible additions, including the new grading system, the increased frequency of inspections, and the alteration of the method for the issuance of franchise licenses for a period of 20 years. These are only some of the enhancements that may be implemented. The firm is now highlighting that, in contrast to the past, these licenses are not supplied on an annual basis, but rather must be obtained. This is in contrast to the previous situation. This is a significantly different circumstance compared to the one that existed before. As a consequence of this change in approach, the growing animosity that exists between McDonald's franchisees and the corporate headquarters of McDonald's grew even more apparent. It is necessary for the franchisees to spend between $1.02 million and $2 million for each site, which results in an immediate return on investment of 10% on an annual basis. This is the case regardless of whether or not their locations produce revenue equal to $100,000 to $150,000 at the time that they made the choice to become a McDonald's franchisee. The promising future that they had envisioned for themselves was not at all what they were experiencing at this very moment. Therefore, rather than creating their very own dive restaurants, they chose to put the money they gained from diving into investments. These operators were making a contribution to the expansion of one of the most well-known organizations in the whole world, despite the fact that they were unaware of the fact that they were doing so. It seemed as if McDonald's had forgotten how vulnerable its franchisees were at the time of their placement in the franchise organization. This is the impression that was sent to the subject. The operators, on the other hand, were forced to bear the financial burden of expensive repairs, while the leaders of the corporation were able to enjoy the benefits of large bonuses and salary raises. McDonald's sought to install new furnishings, decor counters, updated digital kiosks outside, and upgraded drive-through lanes. Nevertheless, the corporation only paid for half of the improvements when they were dispersed throughout all 14,000 of the company's locations. This was despite the fact that McDonald's wished to make these changes. There were 50 states that make up the United States of America, and each of these stores was located in each of those states. The average amount that an operator had to spend in order to rebuild each company was a remarkable $350,000. There had been around $6 billion spent by the company on renovations alone since the year 2018, which meant that franchisees were responsible for an additional $6 billion over the course of the previous 5 years. The firm had spent around $6 billion on renovations, which was the entire amount that had been invested. Taking into account the amount of money that was made by each individual store, this was accountable for more than 70% of the total revenue that was generated by some businesses. When it came to older businesses that had not undergone modifications in decades, franchisees were expected to make an individual contribution of at least $500,000 toward the cost of the repairs. The expenses of these firms are far higher than those of other businesses, and they might go as high as $1 million. The weight of these charges has caused a substantial number of restaurants to reach the point where they are on the edge of selling off their assets. This is because of the fact that they have reached this stage.